I stood outside the front door, the one I used to run through barefoot every summer, the one my dad painted forest green when I was 10. I twisted the key in the lock, but it didn't budge. Again. My breath caught in my throat. This was my house. My name was on the deed. My father's name was on the will. And still, I was locked out like a stranger. Inside, I heard laughter. My mother's voice. My sister Megan's high-pitched giggle. Someone was slicing something, maybe pie, maybe birthday cake, while I stood on the porch with numb hands and shaking knees. I knocked. Nothing. Then I pounded. Still nothing. Finally, the door cracked open 2 inches. Megan's face appeared, smug and sharp. "You shouldn't have come back, Emily," she said. "This isn't your home anymore." I stared at her. At the door. At the lock. Then I pulled out my phone, called the police, and said calmly, "I'd like to report a possible unlawful eviction. I also have a will." Have you ever been cut out of your own life, like you were never part of it to begin with? My name is Emily Hayes. And before the locks changed, before the police showed up, and before the will became the last truth anyone was willing to hear, I was just a daughter who adored her dad. I grew up in a 2-story colonial house in Ashland, Oregon. The kind with white siding, blue shutters, and a magnolia tree out front that my father swore had healing powers. My dad, Richard Hayes, was a contractor, the kind who worked with his hands and loved what they built. He built our porch swing himself the summer I turned 9. Painted it robin's egg blue because he said, "Every girl deserves something sky-colored to dream on." My mom, Linda, was colder. She always had one eye on appearances. Sit up straight. Don't slouch in church. Wear sleeves at dinner. But my dad? He loved softness. Loved laughter. He used to call me Cricket because I sang when I cleaned, humming little made-up tunes with each dish I dried. Growing up, my older sister Megan and I were close enough, or so I thought. She was a cheerleader. I was more of a reader. But back then, I didn't feel the division the way I would later. What I remember most is Saturday mornings. My dad would cook pancakes and let me pour the batter. I was his little sidekick. Sometimes he'd wink at me while Mom nagged from the hallway about how we were getting syrup on the stove. He didn't care. "Mess means memory," he'd say. That man made me feel like I belonged in the world. My relationship with Dad deepened as I got older. In high school, when I had my first heartbreak, a boy named Tyler broke up with me the night before prom. I sat on the back porch in my dress, mascara running like a bad painting. My dad came out and handed me a milkshake. He didn't say much, just sat beside me. Then after a while, he said, "I'd rather you be broken by truth than held together by a lie." That line would mean a lot more years later. College came and went. I stayed in Oregon for school, but I moved out of the house at 19 and took on 2 jobs to support myself. Dad helped when he could, dropped off groceries, left little notes in my mailbox. Megan stayed home longer, working for a local boutique Mom adored. She and Mom were a tight pair. Always at brunch. Always dressed just right. Dad used to joke, "Those 2 belong in a catalog." I laughed, but truth be told, I always felt a little invisible next to Megan. Still, Dad made it better. He never missed a birthday. Showed up to my apartment with cake one year when I was too broke to celebrate. Helped me fix my busted radiator in the middle of a snowstorm. When I got promoted at the insurance firm I worked for, he framed the letter. That was the thing with Dad. He made the ordinary feel important. The shift began slowly. I noticed it around the time he turned 66. He seemed tired, not just physically, spiritually. One day, we were sitting on the porch swing and he said, "You ever feel like everyone's talking over you, even when you're right there?" I knew what he meant. Mom had started overriding his decisions. Megan began bossing him around like he was a child. I saw it. The way they'd roll their eyes when he forgot things. The way they'd dismiss him when he repeated stories. But I listened. I always listened. And I think that's why, about 6 months before he passed, he started giving me files. "Just in case something happens," he'd say. I remember the first time. He handed me a manila envelope while I was helping him clean out the garage. "Don't open it now, but keep it somewhere safe." "Dad, what is it?" He gave a soft smile. Let's call it insurance against confusion. I didn't ask again. I wish I had. Over the next few weeks, he gave me 2 more envelopes. One was labeled Will, final in his shaky handwriting. That one made my stomach flip. Dad, are you okay? He looked at me, eyes clearer than ever, and said, I just want to make sure my voice doesn't get drowned out when I'm not here. He knew. Somehow he knew. In his final months, I visited him more than ever. We'd drink tea and listen to old jazz records in the living room. I'd ask about his favorite memories. He always came back to the porch swing, the pancakes, the milkshake on prom night. You always saw me, cricket, he told me once. Even when I started disappearing. That's when I realized he wasn't just leaving me memories. He was leaving me protection. And yet, when he died, it was Megan and Mom who took over. They planned the funeral. They changed the locks. They acted like I was a guest. I tried to tell them Dad had left things for me, but they dismissed it. Dad wouldn't make decisions without the family, Mom said sharply. He wouldn't leave you anything big, Emily, Megan added. You barely came around. I wanted to scream, to show them the envelopes. But Dad's voice echoed in my head. Don't rush truth. It reveals itself in time. So I waited until they locked me out, and I brought the truth with me. The signs were there, small at first, like hairline cracks in drywall. You don't notice them unless you're really looking, and even then, you think maybe you imagined it. It began around the time Dad's memory started slipping a little. He'd misplace his glasses. Forget where he parked the truck. Nothing huge, not Alzheimer's, not dementia. Just aging. Normal human aging. But to Megan and Mom, it was a reason to seize control. He forgot his meds again. Megan would huff, grabbing the pill organizer out of his hands. He shouldn't be driving anymore, Mom told me once, like she was reading a court statement. They started speaking about him in the third person. While he was in the room, I'd catch his face, confused, a little embarrassed, but silent. At first, I thought they were just concerned. But concern started to feel a lot like condescension. One night, I dropped by with his favorite muffins, banana nut with a cinnamon crumble, and found Megan rearranging the office. Not tidying. Rearranging. Where's Dad's filing cabinet? I asked. Oh, I moved it to the garage. It's all old stuff. He doesn't use it anymore. I felt a pinch in my gut. Did you ask him before doing that? She blinked at me like I was slow. He doesn't need that clutter anymore, Emily. And he told me I could manage things now. She smiled, but it wasn't warm. It was managerial. Triumphant. I looked at Dad, sitting on the couch. He shrugged. She's just trying to help. But his eyes didn't match the words. Soon after, Megan started answering his phone for him. She'd text me back from his number. Hey, Em, doing fine, love you. Only I could tell. Dad never typed love you. He wrote, love ya, kiddo. Every single time. So I called instead. More and more often Megan answered. Oh, he's napping. Oh, he's in the shower. Oh, he's not feeling up to talking. It became a pattern. A pattern I didn't like. Then I started getting left out of family group texts. Event plans were made without me. When I showed up, I was met with awkward silences, the kind you walk into like invisible spider webs. One day, Dad told me quietly, they changed the passcode on the home alarm system. I blinked. Did you ask them to? He shook his head, lips tight. You want me to change it back? No, he whispered. Just hold on to this. He handed me a key. His key. My backup. In case they lose theirs. It felt heavier than any key I'd ever held. That week, I walked into the kitchen and saw Megan going through his checkbook. Need help with something? I asked. She barely looked up. Just helping Dad organize his finances. Does he want help? She snorted. He gets confused. He needs help. Dad was in the other room, staring out the window like he wasn't supposed to hear. It all became worse after he ended up in urgent care. He tripped on the porch, sprained his wrist. Not life-threatening, but scary enough. The ER called me first. I rushed over. But when I arrived, Megan was already there, standing between me and the curtain. He doesn't need more stress, she said. I'm his daughter. So am I. I pushed past her and found Dad pale but alert. Cricket, he smiled weakly. Thought they'd keep me longer. I sat with him that night while he dozed in and out, and when the nurse came to ask who to list as emergency contact, he said my name. Megan overheard. You know that doesn't make sense, right? She said outside the room. You don't even live in town anymore. You're barely around. I was here first. She smiled again. That smug, manager-in-a-suit smile. That's not how this works anymore. After that, Mom and Megan began to behave like a private alliance. I'd come by and find them whispering. Legal pads left out on counters. Pages flipped upside down when I entered the room. I tried to talk to Mom. Is something going on with Dad's will? I asked gently. Her eyes narrowed. He and I have handled the estate, Emily. There's no need to complicate things. I'm not trying to complicate anything. I just want to know what's being planned. Her tone turned icy. You always think someone's out to get you. Maybe if you visited more often, you'd be included. That stung. But I stayed calm. I just don't want to be blindsided. She leaned in, then stopped playing the victim. After that conversation, things accelerated. Megan started calling herself Dad's caregiver. But she wasn't taking care of him. She was taking over. She got access to his accounts. She convinced Mom to move the house title into a family trust, but when I asked what that meant, I was told, it's complicated legal stuff. Don't worry about it. Only I did worry. And so did Dad. The last month before he died, I visited him almost every evening. We'd sit quietly. Sometimes he'd squeeze my hand and say, I trust you. I think he knew what was coming. I think he saw the writing on the wall. The final time I saw him alive, he gave me a look I can only describe as desperate peace. I'm tired, Cricket, he whispered. I kissed his forehead. I'm not letting them erase you, I whispered back. He smiled, then nodded toward the hallway where I knew those manila envelopes were stashed. It all made sense in hindsight. The power grabs, the whispering, the locked drawers, the way Megan looked at me when I asked questions. I used to think betrayal was obvious. Daggers, backstabbing, screaming fights. But it's quieter than that. It's in the way people erase you from conversations. It's in the silences they never fill. It's in the door that's still closed when you knock, even when you're supposed to have a key. And I had a key. But one day soon, even that wouldn't be enough. The call came at 4:42 a.m. I'll never forget the way my phone lit up in that pre-dawn darkness, a name I knew too well but didn't expect. Megan. I hesitated before answering. Something in my gut clenched, already bracing. Emily, she said. Her voice was flat, no trace of panic. Dad passed. I sat straight up in bed. What? He died in his sleep sometime last night. The nurse said it looked peaceful. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. He was supposed to have another checkup today, I stammered. Yeah, well. Guess his body had other plans. No tears. No crack in her voice. She hung up without waiting for mine. I arrived at the house an hour later, still in my hoodie and jeans, heart pounding. The sun was barely rising. I expected grief. Mourning. What I walked into felt like a boardroom. Mom was already seated at the dining table, paperwork spread out in front of her like she was balancing a checkbook. Megan was pacing with her phone to her ear, whispering something about next steps and getting a lawyer on the calendar. I froze in the hallway. The air smelled of coffee and something bitter, lemon-scented cleaning fluid, freshly used. Like they'd scrubbed him out already. Where is he? I asked. Mom didn't look up. They took the body around 5. Did you say goodbye? She finally glanced at me. What good would that do? I wanted to scream, wanted to throw something. But instead, I walked to his room. His bed was neatly made, like he'd never even existed. On the nightstand, his glasses rested, folded, untouched. I picked them up and held them in my hand like they might still be warm. They weren't. The funeral was scheduled in less than 48 hours. No time for emotion. No space for questions. Just logistics. Megan had printed programs already. His face, black and white, looked unfamiliar on glossy paper. They used a picture from a vacation he hated, the one where Mom made him wear that stiff collar shirt. He looked like someone else. I asked if I could speak at the service. Megan said, "We've already planned the order. You can write something for the printed insert." I'm his daughter. I know, Emily. That phrase again. Cold. Dismissive. Full of finality. At the funeral, I sat in the second row. Not by choice. Mom took the center. Megan and her fiancé, Todd, flanked her like a royal court. There was no seat for me. A neighbor named Helen leaned over, saw my face, and quietly made space beside her. During the service, Megan gave a speech. She talked about Dad's quiet strength and his steady nature. But not once did she mention the pancakes. Or the milkshake. Or how he called me Cricket. It was like I didn't exist. After the service, I stayed behind. Waited for everyone to leave. Then I walked up to his casket, which was already half lowered. I whispered, "I have it, Dad. I have everything you gave me. I know what you wanted." And I meant it. When I got back to my apartment that night, I opened the final envelope. Inside was the will. Notarized. Signed. Dated 3 months before his death. It listed his assets. The house. The land. A small savings account. But most importantly, it listed the beneficiaries. To Megan, $10,000 in a lump sum. To Mom, the car and some personal effects. To me, the house. All of it. Every inch. Tears filled my eyes. He'd made his choice. He had spoken for himself. And now, I had to find the courage to make that voice heard. The next morning, I showed up at the house. The one I now legally owned. I parked in the driveway. Walked up the front steps. Slid the key in. It didn't turn. Confused, I tried again. Same result. Then I knocked. Loudly. Megan opened the door halfway, just like she had that day months ago. "What do you want?" "What do I, Megan?" "Open the door." "No. You need to leave." "You changed the locks?" "This isn't your house." I reached into my bag and pulled out the envelope. "I think it is." She glanced at the paperwork and rolled her eyes. Dad was confused. "That won't hold up. It's notarized. Doesn't matter." He signed it with full capacity. "You're going to fight us over a house?" She spat. "I'm going to protect what Dad gave me." She slammed the door in my face. I stood there, heartbeat thudding in my ears. For a moment, I just stared at the green door. Then I called the police. "Hi," I said. "I believe I've been illegally locked out of my own property. I have proof of ownership. And a will." They arrived 20 minutes later. 2 officers. One younger, one older. I handed over the documents. The older one read the will slowly, nodding. "This is your legal address?" he asked. "Yes." "And you've been denied entry?" "Yes." They knocked on the door. Mom answered. They asked her calmly, "Ma'am, did you change the locks on a property that legally belongs to your daughter?" This is a misunderstanding. My husband wouldn't have. We have a notarized will here, ma'am. Unless there's an updated version, she has the right to access the premises." She didn't respond. They told her she had 10 minutes to let me in or face legal consequences. 10 minutes later, the door creaked open. I walked inside. And for the first time in weeks, I felt the house breathe again. But the betrayal didn't end there. 3 days later, I received a legal notice from Megan's lawyer claiming undue influence, that I had manipulated Dad in his final months. I was stunned. Shattered. I had cared for him. Loved him. Sat beside him when they were too busy to show up. Now they were trying to erase that too. But this time I didn't crumble. I hired an attorney. Gathered evidence. Photos, texts, emails. Testimonies from neighbors and his doctor. A signed statement from the notary. They wanted war? I'd give them the truth, no matter how long it took. That first week back in the house was both beautiful and brutal. Everything reminded me of Dad. The porch swing creaked without him. The kitchen felt colder. His slipper sat by the back door, like he might walk in at any moment. But I kept the will on the dining table. I read it every night before bed. Like scripture. Because I needed to remember. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't overreacting. And I wasn't going to let them bury his voice beneath their silence. The air inside the living room felt colder than the breeze outside, and not because of the air conditioning. After Officer Daniel stepped between me and Megan, I took a deep breath, reached into my tote bag, and pulled out the envelope that had lived in my drawer for months, the one I prayed I'd never have to use. This, I said, my voice trembling with the weight of every sleepless night, is the original, notarized copy of Dad's will. The room went silent. My mother, sitting stiffly on the floral love seat, blinked rapidly as if the document were a ghost. Megan's eyes narrowed. That's fake. It's not, I replied calmly. It was filed with Jensen and Marks, and I've confirmed with the probate court. I was just hoping we could talk about this like family. But clearly, I'm not being given that choice. Officer Daniels stepped closer. Mind if I take a look? I handed it to him. His partner, Officer Graves, joined to read over his shoulder. As they studied the document, Megan crossed her arms tightly. My mother said nothing, not even a whisper. Dad wasn't supposed to go that fast. He had been strong for 68. Still hiking. Still gardening. Still cracking jokes over lemon meringue pie like he had all the time in the world. But cancer doesn't ask permission. He didn't have time for long goodbyes. Just enough for a few bedside confessions, some tears, and one last folder. I remembered the moment like a film reel that never stopped playing. He had whispered, his hand dry in mine, you're the one who always stayed. I know it's complicated with your mother and your sister, but I'm trusting you. I changed the will. You're the executor now. It's all yours. I don't want it all, I whispered back, tears in my throat. I just want you. I know, sweetheart. That's why you deserve it. The officer cleared his throat, snapping me back to the present. This appears to be legally binding, he said, glancing at Megan. It names Emily as the sole beneficiary of the estate, including the property. Megan scoffed. Dad would never do that. He did, I said quietly, after you refused to visit him in the hospital. After Mom told him I was making his condition worse by asking him to see a real specialist. My mother flinched. That's not fair. No, what's not fair, I said, turning to face her fully, is being the one who cleaned his sheets, changed his 4 bags, held his hand through morphine nightmares, while you and Megan went on that trip to Martha's Vineyard. You always overdramatize, Megan spat. Tell that to the will. I hadn't wanted to hurt anyone. That's why I waited months to say anything. That's why I gave them space to grieve, to come to me on their own. But instead, Megan moved back into the house like she owned it. Mom redecorated. They blocked my number. They made their claim loud and proud, on Facebook, at the church, even at the neighborhood potluck. Thank God Megan's taking care of the estate, someone had whispered once when I showed up to collect a few boxes. That other daughter was always so unstable. Unstable. Because I didn't play nice when they shut me out. Because I didn't smile when they gave away Dad's tools, or donated his books without telling me.
But now?
Now they had to listen. Officer Graves gestured to the front door. If you're not the legal residents, I'm going to have to ask you to leave the premises until a formal probate court gives other instruction. What? Megan snapped. You're going to evict us? No, I said softly. You already did that to me. This is just balance. Mom stood, her voice shaking. Where are we supposed to go? I looked at her. The woman who used to braid my hair, who used to sing Patsy Cline while vacuuming the hallway, who once told me she loved me more than the moon. And I still loved her. I did. But love doesn't mean letting yourself be erased. I didn't ask you to leave, I said. I asked you to talk. Months ago. You both ignored me. You left me no choice. Megan's face turned red. You're just doing this to punish us. No, I said firmly. I'm doing this to honor Dad. You dishonored his final wishes. That's not grief, that's theft. The officer stayed while Megan and my mother packed overnight bags in furious silence. I sat in the living room, where Dad's recliner had once sat, and stared at the blank wall that used to hold his favorite painting. I thought about how empty the house felt now. Not because of the missing furniture, but because of the love that had been gutted from it. They stormed out around sunset. Megan didn't say a word. My mother paused at the door. Her eyes met mine. I never thought you'd actually fight us. I never wanted to, I whispered. She blinked back tears. For a second I saw something crack. But then she turned and followed Megan down the steps. That night, I walked through every room. I found one of Dad's old flannel shirts in the back of the laundry closet. I held it to my face and sobbed. Not because I won. Not because they lost. But because it had come to this. Because grief makes people greedy. Because love isn't always enough to make family act like family. But also because I kept my promise. I didn't go back to the house for 2 weeks. Not because I was afraid, but because I needed time to think, to cool down, to plan. Those 2 weeks taught me more about my own strength than the 33 years before them. The first 3 days, I didn't sleep. I stayed up replaying the look on Megan's face when she shut that door in mine. The sound of laughter behind that door haunted me. But then, somewhere between night 4 and 5, a strange calm settled over me. They wanted to shake me. They wanted me to scream, to bang on the door like a madwoman, to run away sobbing like I used to when I was a child. Instead, I did what Dad always taught me. If you want to win, don't shout. Build your case. And that's exactly what I did. The next morning, I visited a lawyer named Meredith Gable. Her office was downtown, and when I walked in with a manila folder clutched to my chest, the original will, the house deed, even photos of me and Dad in the backyard garden, she looked me in the eye and said, "They don't know what's coming, do they?" "No," I whispered. "But they will." Meredith poured me coffee and listened to everything. The change of the locks, the family meeting, where I was told the house was being repurposed for Mom's retirement, the passive-aggressive Facebook posts from Megan about entitled people thinking love equals inheritance. She nodded slowly, then said, "They didn't just cross a line, Emily. They erased it. And now it's time to redraw it. Legally, thoroughly, and permanently." We began the process of contesting the forged addendum that they'd somehow slipped into the probate file, an updated will that mysteriously gave full control of Dad's estate to Mom and allowed any surviving family member to assume equal property rights. The problem? Dad never drafted an addendum. The notary listed on that document didn't exist. And the signature they submitted? Meredith spotted 5 irregularities with it in the first 5 minutes. "Game over," she smiled. But I wasn't just fighting for a house. I was fighting for Dad's memory. For truth. For every daughter who was ever told, "Stay quiet, it's not your place." I made copies of every birthday card he ever gave me, especially the ones where he wrote, "This will always be your home, M." I pulled out every photo, Dad and me painting the mailbox, trimming the hedges, him handing me the first house key when I was 16. Then I filed a temporary injunction. The sheriff delivered it to the house that weekend. Megan called me 30 minutes later. "What the hell is this, Emily?" "It's my father's will," I said coolly. "You remember him, don't you? The man who raised me." "You're destroying this family." "No, Megan," I replied. "You did that the day you locked me out." Click. I stared at my phone and felt no tears. Only fire. The next morning, I returned to the house. Not alone, but with 2 officers and Meredith by my side. The locks were changed again. But this time, I had the court on my side. As the officers knocked on the door, I noticed the curtains twitch. My mom opened the door. No welcome, no smile. Just a stunned expression that bordered on betrayal. "You brought the police?" "I brought the truth," I said. Officer Green, kind, no nonsense, explained the injunction. Megan rushed downstairs in her pajamas. "This is harassment." "Not according to the judge," Meredith said, stepping forward. "I suggest you read the document carefully. It's legally binding." My mom looked like she'd aged 10 years overnight. "Why are you doing this to us, Emily?" "To you?" I repeated. "You locked me out of my own home. You told people I was mentally unstable. You tried to erase my place in this family." Mom's lower lip trembled. "We were just trying to keep the peace." "No," I said. You were trying to rewrite history. And now, it's time for a correction. Later that week, in court, the truth came out in waves. Meredith exposed the forged signature. The notary on the new will had died 6 months before it was supposedly signed. Megan stammered. Mom wept. But the judge was unmoved. You cannot fabricate a legal document and expect no consequences, he said sternly. He reinstated the original will. The house? Legally mine. The false addendum? Rejected, reported. My family? Silenced by truth. But it wasn't about revenge. Not anymore. It was about release. I stood in the backyard 2 weeks later, hands in the soil, planting Dad's favorite zinnias. The sun warmed my shoulders. For the first time in months, I felt steady, not victorious. Whole. Because sometimes justice isn't loud. It doesn't always come with fireworks or applause. Sometimes, it arrives on a Tuesday morning, in a quiet courtroom, in the steady voice of a woman who was told to sit down, but stood up instead, and stayed standing. For her truth. For her father. For herself. You'd think that after winning back the house, proving the will was real, proving I wasn't the liar, things would go back to normal. But there's no such thing as normal after betrayal. There's only after. After the truth. After the courtroom. After the silence that follows once the storm passes and everyone's too stunned to speak. The first few days back in the house were oddly quiet. I slept in my old bedroom, though it looked different now. Megan had painted over the soft yellow walls with a sterile gray. The furniture was different. Even the closet smelled like someone else's perfume. But I reclaimed it. Piece by piece. I peeled off the wallpaper she had put up. I found my old quilt in a sealed box in the attic. I replaced the doorknob with the one Dad had polished every spring, still in the junk drawer, still waiting. The past clung to the walls like whispers, and I let them speak. It was both comforting and excruciating. The neighborhood changed too. Some of the neighbors who once brought over casseroles during my father's chemo now wouldn't meet my eyes. Others quietly slipped notes under the door. We didn't know what was really going on. I'm so sorry, Emily. You did the right thing. He was always so proud of you. That meant more than I expected. Because when your family turns against you, you look for anchors. Any sign that you weren't crazy. That you weren't making it all up in your head. Those notes, those small, unprompted truths, were like air in my lungs. But they couldn't fix what was already fractured. Megan never spoke to me again after the court ruling. Not one call. Not one text. The last thing she posted on social media was a picture of a family dinner. Her, my mom, and some cousins with the caption, "Real families don't need to prove anything." I didn't reply. There was no point. Because I finally realized something that had taken me 33 years to understand. Not all blood is family. Not all family is love. And sometimes, letting go isn't giving up, it's growing up. Mom, on the other hand, did reach out, weeks later. She called early one morning. Her voice was hoarse. Shaky. "I saw the roses in the garden," she said. "Your father always wanted you to take care of them." "I know," I replied softly. A pause. Then she whispered, "I don't know what to say to you anymore." "You don't have to say anything," I said. "I just hope one day you'll understand why I had to do it. I raised you better than this, Emily." "No," I said calmly. "You raised me to obey. Dad raised me to do what was right." Click. That was the last time we spoke. You know what no one tells you about standing up for yourself? It costs you people. Even the ones you love. Maybe especially the ones you love. But it also reveals who's truly in your corner. Aunt Rachel drove in from 4 states away just to hug me in the driveway. "You've got your father's backbone," she said, eyes welling. "And your mother's fire. But you used them better than either of them ever did." Corey, Dad's old fishing buddy, stopped by with tools and helped me fix the gutters. He didn't say much, but before he left, he nodded and said he'd be proud. I cried after he left. Not because I was sad, but because it felt like truth had finally spoken back. I started therapy too. Dr. Lindstrom was patient, warm, and disarmingly blunt. "You won," she said. "But you still sound like you lost something." I did. I replied. I lost the illusion that they ever really loved me the way I thought they did. Good, she said. Now we can grieve something real. And so I did. Grief, I learned, isn't just for the dead. It's for the dreams we had about people. The version of mom who protected me. The sister who defended me. The family that felt like home. They weren't real. And once I let them go, something amazing happened. I stopped trying to prove myself. I started becoming myself. I renovated the living room. I painted it blue, not the color of sadness, but of sky, of expansion. I hung up a large photo of Dad and me fishing on Lake Harmony, the only photo Megan had left untouched. I placed his watch, still ticking, on a shelf next to it. And then I exhaled. Not just breath, but years of guilt, shame, and fear that had lived in my chest like squatters. It was my house again. It was my life again. And I was done asking for permission to live in either. The first morning I brewed coffee in the house, my house, with no one around to question my presence or challenge my right to be there, I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Quiet joy. The kitchen was filled with early sunlight. The floorboards creaked just as they always had. I opened the window, and the breeze carried the faintest trace of roses. Dad's roses. For the first time since his death, I didn't feel haunted. I felt home. Closure doesn't come all at once. It's not a single moment. It's a mosaic of tiny ones. Turning the key in the front door without flinching. Laughing, really laughing, at a joke I read in a book. Finding a letter from Dad tucked in a drawer I'd never opened before, in his unmistakable cursive. Don't let them bully you. You're stronger than all of them combined. I wept for a long time after reading that. Not from sadness, but from confirmation. The voice in my head that had screamed, "You're not crazy. You're not weak. You're not wrong." It was his. It always had been. I didn't rebuild the family I had. I built a new one. Friends who showed up without asking what they'd get in return. Neighbors who offered kindness without gossip. Cousins who admitted, finally, that they'd been too scared to speak, but they believed me all along. We hosted game nights. We planted a small herb garden. We painted a mural on the back fence. It said, "You are not what they did to you. You are what you chose to become after." And every time I read it, I remembered. Not the pain, but the power I found inside the pain. One Sunday, I sat on the porch with a journal in my lap and wrote a letter to my younger self. Dear Emily, they will try to erase you. They will gaslight you, mock you, even cut you out of your own history. But you will fight back. With truth. With grace. With the same quiet strength Dad saw in you since you were small. And in the end, you will not be alone. You will be standing on ground that is finally yours, inside and out. I'm so proud of you. Love. You. I folded that letter and placed it behind Dad's photo, right next to the watch that still ticked, not just with time but with legacy. I no longer need revenge. I no longer need validation. Because I have something they'll never be able to steal, forge, or manipulate. Peace. The kind that comes not from winning in court, but from knowing you never abandoned yourself, even when everyone else did.